When I lost my cat, I was sent a grief kit by the company that took care of him at the end. I had his paw print, the story of the Rainbow Bridge, him in that little box, and a pamphlet. It said I should write out a timeline, marking the most important times of his life, but it's such a small page. There's no room for my baby in this little book. So today, this video and this painting will be my timeline. Our story begins in May of 2006. It was then that my baby was born. Houdini was a white Manx cat, and he fit the bill. They're known for having very powerful hind legs, being able to jump high heights, being rather vocal, and for often having health issues. From the jump, my baby was sick. The people caring for him, I believe kind of like a foster family situation, began to pour so much love and attention into him. He was held, he was bottle fed, he was cared for. They didn't know if he would make it, but they fought for him. It must have been at this time that my sister, a year and a half older than me, told me we should get a cat. Together, we hatched a plan because we were little kids. We had no money. We knew the answer from my dad, if we asked, would be no. He wasn't an animal lover the way my mother is. So she was our target for this little con. After all, she would take us to shelters and pounds to volunteer with the animals, and we already had 2 dogs because of her, as well as rats at times, and my slew of goldfish. She was our prime target. We started by politely asking, but that quickly escalated into public embarrassment. We would wait until we were in public places with lots of people to beg and plead. I have the strong memory of kneeling on the ground beside rows of DVDs and my mom insisting that we could talk about it in the car. Now, my mom by this time had already been considering getting a cat. She just hadn't told us. Apparently, there was a mouse problem in the garage, and she wanted a professional. So off she went to look. She so desperately wanted a Siamese like in Lady and the Tramp, but she could not for the life of her find one. But at Second Chance Rescue, she gave in and started looking at other types of cats. And who was already there playing with the mouse toy? Houdini. He was still sniffling, but he was healthy enough to play. My mom didn't know much about choosing cats and gauging their temperament, so she did what she did with dogs. She picked him up and she flipped him on his back. And he liked it. He didn't fight, he just enjoyed being held. My mom decided right then that he was the one. But the foster mom of the cat was not thrilled because Houdini had a brother, and she wanted them to find a home together. However, we only had room for one. My mom talked with this lady an hour before she relented, and we were able to take Houdini home. But don't fear, his brother had a happy home within a week. But then we had to introduce him to the household. So, Houdini, when we first brought him into the house, he was just a little thing. And we had 2 poodles. One of them was a standard poodle. Her name was Tasha. But the thing about standard poodles is they were originally bred to hunt. They're hunters. And she was a hunter. We weren't hunters, but she was. And Houdini, we had him in a room. We had her on leash, and we were going to gently introduce them to each other so that we could kind of softly... You know how it is with dogs and cats when you introduce them to a household together. It's like you want them both to be free to roam, but you need to make sure they're safe. So we're introducing them. Tasha's on leash. Houdini is being held, I think, by my sister. It's been a long time. Obviously, it's been 19 years. But Houdini, he escaped. So Tasha comes into view and he gets out of her arms and goes running. And Tasha, she escapes because no one expected the cat to be able to run. And so she manages to run, leash behind her, and she runs after Houdini. And then Houdini, on the floor, he rolled over. He just rolled over. And he started playing with her face. And so she's over him, poised like a hunter, and he's on his back just la-di-da-di-da-di-da with her nose. And they were best friends. We didn't have to really worry about them after that. So it was very cute. Of course, he also met Toby, a toy poodle who mainly enjoyed cuddling and food. Their meeting was not nearly as dramatic. Now, I was the one who got to name Houdini, and his name fit perfectly. He was quite the magician. He'd disappear, and we would worriedly search the house only to discover him sitting perfectly still amongst the stuffed animals. He also did daring stunts. It wasn't unusual to see him walking the pole of the curtains with his little stub tail just brushing the ceiling. If there was a hidden nook or cranny or a high height, that's where he was.
He started out as my sister's cat, but became mine. And I think about that first night he spent in my room all the time. Because at the time, he was still new to the house. We were kennel training him so that he would sleep at night. But he was so good. And he was in this kennel with a litter box, and he was closed in. And I remember it was dark in my room, but there was like the moonlight kind of shining through my window. And I was laying there and I was looking at him, and he was looking at me. And it almost felt like a psychic connection. You know what I mean? Where you just look at each other and you know what the other person, or the other, in this case, cat, is thinking. And he wanted in the bed. And so did I. So I opened the little door and I curled up with him in the bed, and I held him for the first time, and we went to sleep. And he slept the whole night through, just being held. And you know, he loved that. After that, he always slept in my bed with me.
He quickly developed a bedtime routine, and he did not like it when I broke that routine. I typically went to bed around 9 or 10 at that age, but as I got into middle school, I started staying up later and later doing homework and reading books. If the lights weren't out by 11, Houdini started turning off the light himself. He'd jump from the floor to the light switch and he'd hit it, or he would get up on the dresser and pull the string to my old lamp. So I'd get up from the bed and I'd turn it back on, and then he'd just turn it right back off. I didn't want to do homework anyways, so I usually gave in and finished whatever I didn't do that night on the bus in the morning. But he was playful too.
My cat was a really clever guy. I remember there's this one time I was playing with him as a kid, and we were always playing with the laser light. Loved playing with him with the laser light. And he really liked it too. And he would go all over. He'd jump on the walls, and he had such strong little legs that he could bounce to the ceiling if he wanted to. And sometimes he did. And I remember I must have been playing with him with it way too much, because there was this day where he was playing, he got really tired, and then he just turned around and was looking at me while I was like doing the laser light thing. And he walked up towards me, jumped up on the bed where I was sitting with the laser light. And then he put his mouth around it, like took the laser light and just took it from me. He was done playing. He didn't want to do it anymore. Oh, he was so clever. He knew we were playing with him, you know? It's not like it was a mysterious light. He understood that we were in control of it. My clever little guy.
He was incredibly smart and well-mannered, for me at least. During dinners and lunches at home, he would sometimes sit in my lap while I ate, which my dad hated. And I would let him sniff my food, and I'd give him bits of the food I liked and lots of the food I didn't. I didn't know it yet, but I had some developing health issues around food. So anytime there was roast beef on my plate, for instance, he would split it pretty evenly with Tasha and Toby. It was around that time as well that I was given my first computer. I was always writing little stories, and I had a dream to publish. So I started staying up late into the night writing with my laptop. Houdini did not like that. He could turn out the lights, but I could still stay up writing until midnight. I suspect he coexisted with the laptop out of necessity, but he would walk on it, jump on it, lay on it, anything he could do to take the attention away from the laptop and put it back on him. And he was loud. When I fed him, I would often talk as if I were him, saying, "Right now, Mom." He got really good at those words. My mom was both offended and amused one day when she told him, "In a second," and he said, "Right now." Houdini would sometimes scratch her for food too, but he never really did that with me. He might paw me, but he never put out his claws. But he was so funny about food.
Well, let me tell you a real good one. Houdini, I came home one day and I think I must have been in 6th grade, pretty young. And I came home and I had McDonald's and I had one of those Happy Meals where you have the fries and the chicken nuggets. And I was like, you cannot have my chicken nuggets. Let me be. And he really wanted them. He wanted them so bad. And so I eventually picked up the chicken nuggets and I like clutched them to my chest and like kept him away. Do you know what he did? He turned around, looked at my fries, he sniffed them, and then he ate one. And I was just staring at him the whole time like, what's happening? Do you like what? And then he took his little mouth and he like bit the cardboard box and he dragged it away. He ate so many of my French fries. And you know, he was just a little cat and I was just a little person. So I guess he lived to be 19, so I guess the fries didn't kill him.
Now, by this point in my life, I had been waffling about what I wanted to do with my life. That's a really big thing when you're a kid. What do you want to do when you grow up? At first, I wanted to make a theme park, one that was fully accessible to every person and animal, but I didn't think that was feasible by the time I hit 5th grade. Then I got really into criminology because I wanted to save people and stop cruelty. I was dead set on becoming an FBI agent just like Derek Morgan from Criminal Minds. Yet, at the same time, I started getting really into theater. I really loved it during middle school, and I just wanted more and more to do that, though it hadn't occurred to me yet that that could be a career path at all. This is when Spike appeared. The summer before my freshman year of high school, a dog was wandering my neighborhood. He was a little miniature pinscher, and he was starved. Someone had dumped him, but my mom was determined to catch him, and she did, using my dad's prime ribs, which he still brings up. And not only did Spike get a feast, but he got a home. He was whiny, and he would hate it whenever anyone walked away from him or left the room. And Houdini loved him. They cuddled a lot, and it was just so sweet. I loved my dogs, and my cat, and my goldfish too. And that's not to mention the rats and the bearded dragon my sister got. Our house was a zoo. Meanwhile, school got harder. I loved theater, and as I became more and more disillusioned with the justice system, and the more I discovered theater was the path I wanted to follow, well, things got rough. That was my future, but I often felt like I was being pushed out of the theater at high school. It made me fight for what I wanted, but it also made me really sad. And sometimes I look back at those years, and I think Houdini was the one that got me through it, because I could come home and hold him, and I knew that he loved me. He never saw what other people saw. I was his person, and no matter what, I always would be. So when I felt abandoned at times, it never fully sank in, because he would never leave me. I suppose that's the power love and faith bring. You can't hollow out a person who truly knows love regardless of who it's from. But then came Houdini's first health scare.
You know, it's funny. The first time we almost lost him was, gosh, he might have been 10. I wasn't even out of high school yet. I might not have even left middle school yet. I'm not really sure. But it was so scary. But I remember it was the middle of the night and I had him. I always had him. And I was laying down and he turned around and he started meowing at me. And I think it was like a Friday night. But maybe not. I think it might have been a spring break at school, but he starts meowing at me. And he's meowing and meowing, and he wanted me to know that he couldn't use the bathroom. He was in a lot of discomfort, and he couldn't go, which scared me because I was like, what is wrong with my cat? And so my mom, she starts calling around vets, and we discover pretty quickly he needs surgery. He needs, he has to have this surgery or he's gonna die. And I remember I started crying and I went out to the porch so I could take a second, and my sister got kind of frustrated with me and was like, It's not like he's gonna die. And my mom had to correct her and be like, I'm sorry, but if he doesn't get the surgery, he is going to die. And the vet that we went to at the time, the amount of money that they were going to charge for his vet care was ludicrous. It was ridiculous, and my parents couldn't afford it. And so I knew there was a high chance at the time that I was saying goodbye to my cat. And he lives, don't worry. But I was like really overwhelmed, and my mom started calling around places. And she called this one place and she got a price. And I think it was somewhere around $200 to $400. It was high, but it was also low. It was lower than most places, you know? And I was so scared. But my mom called my dad and said, I found a vet that can do the surgery. And it's only whatever the heck it was, $300 something. And I remember hearing my dad on the phone go, he's not worth that much money. And I remember it made me so stressed out because I was so scared. But he sighed and went, pay it. So even though he was like, that's an absurd amount of money, he was still like, save the cat. And so I bundled him up in a blanket, and Houdini purred the whole time I was holding him. We took him in, and it was funny because he's purring and purring, cuddled in my arms. He knows he's going to be okay. I think he had faith we were going to take care of him. And I took him into this waiting room, and I held him through it. We got into the back, and the vet checked him out, told us what it was going to be, how it was going to work, and they had to take him overnight. And I remember I had him bundled in my arms and set him on the, what do you call it? I set him on the thing, the vet table, the table. I don't know why that was so hard for me. But I set him on the table, and he was still purring up a storm. He was enjoying being held. He was getting so much attention. You know how cats are. And he was pretty content. And then the vet was like, all right, say goodbye. We'll see him tomorrow. And she picked him up out of my arms, and she walked out of the door. And as she walked through the door, he popped his little head over, and he was looking at me. You've never seen betrayal until you saw how Houdini looked at me over that vet's shoulder. I didn't know cats could make that face, but that was pure, what is wrong with you? She's taking me away. But the surgery went great. He was okay. I took him home, and everything was pretty good. The only real change was that he had to get urinary tract food. So we give him urinary tract food, and his diet just adjusts. He's okay to still have some other things, but he has to have his urinary tract food.
But we didn't wind up getting rid of his old food altogether, because we got another pet. Chi-Chi was a neighborhood cat that we think started as a neighbor's house cat. When he passed away, we suspect his kids just kicked her out onto the street, and she found herself pregnant there. My sister was incredibly invested in her and named her, and my mom made an agreement with the neighbor to house her in our garage while they took turns feeding her. Well, pretty soon the garage turned into the hallway between the house and the garage, which turned into my sister's room, and the neighbor never once fed that cat. But Chi-Chi, so sweet and lovey, she missed her due date. The kittens never came, so my mom took her to the vet, where she discovered that Chi-Chi's kittens, they weren't with us. So they took care of her, and she came home. And that's when her real personality came out. She was still pretty sweet, but where I could pet Houdini anywhere, she only wanted to be petted under the chin and around the ears. Otherwise, she would bite. She also hated being carried. Very strange when I lugged Houdini everywhere and anywhere. They were the best of friends. For a month. Then the cat fights began. I can admit that Houdini did have flaws, and bullying Chi-Chi may have been one of the biggest. For the most part, my presence deterred him, but it could be tough, especially since my health declined a lot. From an ovarian cyst to food problems and a back injury, Houdini was fantastic at caring for me. He would lay on the areas that hurt and purr, often bringing down my pain levels. He was also a masseuse. He just magically knew where it hurt, and he would massage you exactly in the right place to bring down the pain. He was a lifesaver for a kid that was always sick or injured. But even with my back injury, I went to college, and I went for theater. I wish I had applied to make him an emotional support cat during college because we both hated being separated. He alternated between anger and clinginess when I was home on weekends and breaks.
Once when I was in college, I came home over one of the winter breaks. I think it was like midterm time. And I had this class where we didn't actually have to turn in. So we didn't have to turn in anything by a specific time. The professor was just like, turn it in whenever. I'll be happy. Which meant that I turned in everything at the last second. Every single thing. That poor soul. But anyways, that night I came home and I had Chi-Chi on one side of me on the bed and Houdini on the other while I was typing away on my computer. And they were both so comfy, so interesting. And as they're laying there, every so often one of them, like if this is me, one of them would pop up their head, look at the other one, and it'd hiss. And then on the other side, like after this one would lay down its head, they would like go, oh, is that cat over there? And then this one would hiss. And they'd put their head down. And they did that the whole time through like 5 different essays. Oh my gosh. And that night I made a bad decision. I was like, I'm amped up after doing all of these homework assignments. I don't want to go to bed. I'm going to do some art. And so I was just starting to do my own art pieces. And so I did these art pieces all back to back. And I probably did like 6 hours, 8 hours worth of art all at once. All just never getting up from the desk. So my back was like hunched over and I couldn't stand up straight. So when I went to bed, I had to go I tried to lay down and I went on all fours. I couldn't lay down. And Houdini looked at me, like he gave me a look and then he climbed up on my back. And like a good boy, he started doing the paw thing and he massaged my back until the muscles loosened and I could lay down. He was a really good therapy cat, you know? That was one of his skills.
I suspect we both struggled to sleep without the other. Sometimes I look back and suspect that this is where Houdini's jealousy issues started. See, between my freshman and sophomore years of college, I started dating one of my best friends from high school. Right before we started dating on one of our breaks, Alex came over. He sat down on the couch, we watched a movie, and I awkwardly held his hand through it. Meanwhile, Houdini was staring at me from the top of the stairs, then the bottom of the stairs, then the foot of the couch, then back at the top of the stairs, and then back to the bottom of the stairs, the foot of the couch, and over again. I could not figure out for the life of me why he didn't just jump in my lap like normal. But I realized later that he just wanted me to pick him up. Now, Houdini and Alex already knew each other and liked each other. But after that, there was a one-sided rivalry. It wasn't one-sided for long. Houdini would often wait for Alex to leave the house to jump in my lap so he just wouldn't have to share. But then there was this one day that Alex was so tired. So he put his head in my lap and he went to sleep. And since the house went quiet, and Alex is rather loud, Houdini thought he left. Houdini came running to the top of the stairs and he didn't see him, and so Houdini meowed at me to stay still and I just didn't have time. Houdini came racing down the steps, leapt into my lap, only to see Alex's face at the very last second. Poor Houdini panicked and wound up climbing the back of the couch, and Alex jerked awake, upset because he'd just been woken up by tiny knives in his face. Alex insists to this day that it was an assassination attempt. But you know, Houdini's jealousy also extended to other cats, of course.
I was his one and only, and I was not allowed to be around other cats. So for instance, there was this day where we had kittens over for a short period of time before like they were going to go to someone else. I think we were the middleman for a foster home. I think that's what was happening. But anyway, these two little kittens, and they were adorable. And so I was there, I was like, I want to pet them, I want to hold them, I want to touch them. I want to do all the things that my cat doesn't want me to do. And they were adorable. But Houdini comes creeping down and he sees them, and we had his litter box down there so they could use it, and he's like, they're touching my litter box, they're touching my person. And he was trying real hard not to be mad. You could kind of tell. He was being awfully gentle for how much anger was within his soul. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna ruin it if I laugh. But he was so angry. And after they went, I like picked him up and I hugged him and I was like, it's okay. And he was angry. You could see it in his little eyes. Put a picture in there too, because like we got him. And he was so upset that at certain point he let me know he wasn't having it, and I wasn't paying enough attention to the signs. So he scratched me. And I think it's the only time I can think of where he really genuinely intentionally scratched me. But as soon as he did it, he got really, really upset because I don't think he meant to. So he scratched me and I got these little lines and I was like bleeding a lot because it was a head wound. So he got me right by the ear. And then once he saw what he'd done, he started crying. He started meowing. He was like pacing. He was so upset, and he wouldn't calm down until I cuddled him. Because I think what happened is that he wanted to tell me off. I don't think he wanted to hurt me. So when he saw the blood, he really, really got upset. And he never scratched me again, you know? He didn't. He really didn't. There's some people I've met and that I've talked to about losing him. And they were like, yeah, you know, in the very least, I got to keep my scars because their cat would leave, like maybe would scratch them somewhere, and the scars stayed. And even though they had like a very good cat and stuff like that, they still had marks to remember him. I don't have anything like that. My cat, he was such a sweet boy. And I really just, he never did anything of that nature. So I don't have anything of that nature. And I can't regret that. That means he never wanted to hurt me. He never did hurt me. He was a gentle little boy. But sometimes I'm a little jealous that sometimes people have a more permanent reminder, I suppose. I don't know. Maybe I'll get a tattoo or something.
My sophomore year of college was hard for a multitude of reasons, but one of the hardest things was losing my aunt. She had a special strain of ovarian cancer, so all that could be done was make her comfortable. I was in a really big play called Proof at the time, so I couldn't come home. And then I assumed I had more time, so I helped fill in as a last-second stage manager for another play. It's not true, by the way. It's never true. There's never more time. So I didn't get to see Rainey before she passed. But Houdini and my mom took care of her. The day she died, Houdini cuddled her. He stayed with her until the end and beyond. And when they came to take my aunt away, my mom had to physically take Houdini away from her. He was just so good. And I don't have words for that, but you should know. He was the best. But while he hated college, he loved the lockdowns. COVID came my senior year of college. My very last semester, he basically got to attend with me. Every class, he purred or slept in my lap. And when I graduated, I started doing more online stuff. I started drawing on TikTok. I started a name art series, which kind of blew up over there. I started getting gas money here and there for my videos, and people online loved Houdini. I featured him a lot in my videos, and my favorite comment to this day was someone telling me how much they liked my ferret. So I tried again over here on YouTube, expanding, trying to take it more seriously. And Houdini, he really loved my sewing projects. I laid out a fabric and he was pleased. If I started using my sewing machine, he purred with it. I suspect he would have loved it if I became a full-time seamstress or cosplayer. Now, I wish I did more sewing projects just for him, though at the time, I was still doing some sewing.
I was costume designing a play. It was called Electra. It was Electra. I don't... today. Anyways, I'm costume designing a show called Electra. And we were still kind of COVID, but I don't know. It was like in some weird transition phases where live theater was returning, but also people were more filming it instead of having actual stage productions. So we're filming this production of Electra, and I am the costume designer. And we're doing a production meeting, going over what we need to do, making sure we're all on the same page, what's happening with this costume design. And I'm in the middle of this meeting. We're at the end of this meeting, and I am talking. It is my turn. I am talking. And Houdini was always in my lap during production meetings. Every single time. And I think that day he just got curious. He was like, "What are you always looking at?" And so mid-sentence, he reached up with his paw and he grabbed my phone and pulled it down so that he could look at everyone. And everyone, immediately, production meeting's over. They're like, "Is that a cat? What was that? I want to see the cat." So everyone's looking at Houdini. Houdini's happy because that's really what he wants all the heckin' time. Attention.
It wasn't too long after that before I was able to see my partner again. It was during that really weird time of the lockdowns lifting, wherein you could see some people you cared about, but everyone was still limiting their contact, so nothing was like crazy. But it was then that Houdini finally extended the olive branch to my partner. He was sitting in my lap, and Alex had just come with food, and Houdini looked at him. Then he stood up out of my lap, joined Alex, laid down, and he started purring. I can't tell you that Alex got over their feud, but I'm really proud that my cat did. He recognized that Alex was a permanent fixture in my life, and he decided to do the one thing that people will tell you cats don't do: forgive and forget. His approval meant a lot to me as well, since Alex became my fiancé. That was a really weird time in my life, too, as I tried to focus more on content creation, on a job, and on doing way too much in general. But I still noticed when my cat stopped eating his medicated food. I would cajole him and trick him into eating, sprinkle chicken on his food to get him to take just one bite, hold the food in the air so he wouldn't have to bend his head, hand feed him, heat it up, cool it down. He only would eat from his snowman, so I had a snowman dish that I would just constantly wash and reuse. But I learned the tricks to make him eat, and then things got worse.
He started getting really sick, and it was really very scary. He wasn't eating well, and he was struggling to make it to the bathroom all the time, and he was dropping weight, and that was really scary because this cat, before this point in his life, he'd always been somewhere between 10 and 12 pounds. Always. He was never like a big cat, but he was always like a healthy weight. And he was dropping so much, and I got scared it was the end for him. Because he also started doing this thing where he would scratch himself. And he would scratch himself until he bled. And so we'd find injuries on him, and at first we didn't realize it was him, that he was doing it to himself. And it was terrifying. So we got him to the vet, and at that point he only weighed He only weighed about 5 pounds. And it was a horrible thought because he was just so despondent, and it really scared me. I thought I was saying goodbye to my cat, and the vet, he was an older vet at the location where Houdini got his surgery. And they told us, like, you know, we don't know what it is. We can do a series of tests. But the problem is that even if you pay all this money and do these tests, we have no way to tell you. We have no promises or guarantees that we can even treat what's wrong with him. So you might find out the name of what would kill your cat, but it might not do anything. And it was so much money. And I remember being just heartbroken. And I was crying in the office. I was crying so much. And the vet, he looked at me and he was like, I want you to know, like, you're not a bad pet owner if you don't do these tests. You're not. He loves you. It's very clear. Which was very sweet. Ooh. And he said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to give him a steroid shot. And he was like, if by tomorrow he starts eating, he might have a fighting chance. And that was really hard. That was really hard because we had no way of knowing if this steroid shot would work or not. For all intents and purposes, it was a Hail Mary. And so we took him to the vet. We got the Hail Mary. We took him home. And when I got home, it was so scary. And I was just holding him. All he wanted to do was be held. And he was so tired. And I'm holding him. And I prayed this prayer. And I'm a Christian, but I'm not a jerk about it. At least that's what I like to say. And so I pray a lot. And I prayed this prayer where I said, God, I'm going to ask for a miracle. Not just for today, but I'm going to ask for all the miracles. I'm going to ask that every single time that Houdini will come back, and I'm going to ask every single time for a miracle. And I prayed that one day God would stop answering my prayer. That he would give me as many miracles as he could without making Houdini suffer. As many miracles as I could be given without hurting my boy. And right after I prayed that prayer, he crawled out of my lap towards this little plate of food we set out, and he finally ate. And it was my first miracle, you know? We took him back to the vet the next day, and we told him he ate, and the vet was really happy. He gave us the steroid to take home and give to him at home. It wasn't in the form of a shot anymore. It was like a liquid that we would have to get him to drink. But anyways, I was so relieved. I was so grateful to bring him home. And they gave me the warning. They were like, just so you know, we're going to give you free vet visits, free office calls for like the yearly. But the truth is, we don't expect your cat to live very long. He was terminal, and they told me, you know, it could be a month, it could be 3. You might get lucky and have him a year. So cherish your time.
So I redoubled my efforts. I used every trick in the book I knew to get him to eat. I cuddled the life out of him, and I did everything I could to keep him happy and healthy, including eventually switching from the take-home medication to a steroid shot every month in the veterinary office. The steroid shots were wild because from the first day he was taken away from me for surgery way back when, he was terrified of that table. So I held him through every shot, and still, he never scratched me. He did bite me once, but not enough to even sting. There wasn't even an indent left. We always scheduled his shots so I would be right there with him so he wouldn't be scared. He was so gentle. He might hiss or meow during the shot, but he was a little gentleman. He didn't need a kennel or a leash. He would just sit in my lap while we waited and then be held on our way out. One time, though, I couldn't go. So my parents had to take him alone, and apparently he threw a fit. He hissed at the vet, at the technicians, the receptionist, at random people he passed by. He was just cursing everyone, and he was furious. So that was the only time I did not go with him. But during that time, he wasn't the only one declining. We had already said goodbye to Toby and Tasha, but Spike had held on even as new dogs joined the household. But one day, his heart gave out, and losing him, it was traumatic. Things went really wrong at the vet, and I won't go into that, but that meant that Houdini didn't have his buddy anymore. I think he was lonelier after that. He still had me, but if I was gone too long, like for a week-long trip, he would stop eating. So, once I realized, I stopped going on any trips for the rest of his life. I babied him, and he loved that. That time was precious to me, beyond precious, because he got so spoiled and he was so happy. So happy that he lived longer than 1 month. Longer than 3 months, longer than a year, longer than 2 years. And I'm so grateful because he was not supposed to make it to just even that first year. I think the vet was shocked that he made it past the 3 months. He was in really bad shape. But there's also a part of me that thought he could just keep going, keep defying the odds forever, keep making memories. And I definitely have more memories.
When we moved, we knew it would be tough because he's a cat. And cats are notoriously difficult movers. It's just really hard on them, You gotta be gentle with your cats when you move. But I was 1000% taking him with me. And so, it was so funny because the first night he spent in the apartment, I closed the doors to the other rooms for the most part. And then I let him see the big main room, the living room area, with the kitchen and everything, because I thought that was the best place for him. And he explored that room, he sniffed everything. When he saw a closet he could go into, he went in there. He did some meowing, some running back and forth, but it wasn't like panicked. He kind of seemed excited. And I already had his some of his stuff there. So he was excitedly looking at his stuff in the space. And eventually I sat down with him right on the floor. We didn't have a couch yet. We just had a TV. So he planted himself in front of the TV on the floor. And so I sat down and he curled up and started purring, just looking at me, looking around. And I'll tell you one thing, he really claimed that room. He loved that room. He wanted me and my fiance in there all the time.
For instance, there was this one day where he tried to corral my fiance and I into the same room. By then, we still didn't have a couch, but it was a lazy night. I was cuddling him in the main area while watching a show, and Alex, my fiance, he was in the other room playing a game. Then Houdini went to use the bathroom, and on his way back, he went into the room that I'm actually painting this in, and he let Alex know that it was time to stop playing and join us for a show. Now I heard Houdini meowing at him, so I grabbed him and I brought him back out, and I settled him. And he cuddled me about 10 minutes, purring the whole time, and then he went right back over to Alex to give him a piece of his mind. So again, I tried to settle Houdini in the main room, but he kept going back. So I grabbed the blanket and I cuddled Houdini in the room right next to Alex. And Houdini was so pleased with himself. He purred and purred and purred, and he loved that we were all three hanging out together. And you should have seen it when we'd brought the couch. He loved it immediately, and he just claimed it. His favorite place to be was on the couch with me. And during the time in the apartment, his allergies improved so much, it made me wonder if he really was allergic to dogs. He was super loud though, and that was a scary thing. Because, like, for instance, once I had to go to work. And so I settled him, I tried to give him treats, I tried to make him happy, and then I shut the door. And I made it all the way down to the bottom level of my apartment. I'm up high, and I could hear him as I was walking out of my building. He was just so loud. I felt bad every time I had to go to work. But soon enough, his appetite declined. It wasn't just his food that he didn't want to eat. It was just about anything. I was using every old trick, and he was eating maybe 4 to 5 bites of food a day. So I tried one more shot since the steroids typically made him hungry, and I thought I could jumpstart his appetite to get him better, but it only lasted a few days. He was back on the decline. So I tried new tricks and treats. I started making sure all his food was freshly cooked, chicken or salmon or turkey on the stovetop. I made sure that it was nice and fresh and juicy. I brought him liquid squeezy tubes and gravies and fancy foods, and, I gave him food from my plate too. The last thing he ever ate was part of my salad. I believe it was Thursday the 8th of January, 2026. All day he had refused food, but my partner made us chicken salads, and so I bit off a couple pieces of the chicken to give to him. He ate 3 pieces and refused to eat anything else. He refused to eat anything else ever again. He started hiding poorly behind the couch whenever I'd try to feed him, and I tried quite hard. Over the weekend, I had to accept it. I had to say goodbye. So Monday night, I took him in my arms and I locked up my apartment, knowing I wouldn't be bringing him back. And I was barely keeping it together. But I turned around and my neighbor had forgotten her keys in the door. I'm not proud of this, but I really thought about walking away. I thought, today is really hard for me. I don't want to talk to anyone, but I don't want to be the kind of person that says it's too hard to do the right thing. Life's not about what's easy to do. So I knocked.
And the mom came out and the little girl came out. And I was like, hey, just so you know, your keys are out here. And they were like, oh, thank you so much. And the little girl was like, oh, I love her cat. Can I pet him? And I was like, yeah, you can pet him. He loves attention. And so she pet him. And it was funny because she turned to her mom and she said, can we get a cat just like that? And her mom said, of course we can. Oh. Of course we can.
What I neglected to mention all this time is that Houdini loved children. He would let a child do anything to him and purr while they did it. Once, a little toddler was at our house when I was in middle school, and he started a game where he held Houdini in his little arms and he jumped on the ground, landing his entire body weight on my cat. Now, I stopped it, but Houdini purred when he did it, and he purred afterwards as this kid pet him. He loved kids so much that I'm happy that he got to have one more kid pet him before he went. That night, we stayed in my childhood home and slept on the couch. He purred and purred all night, and we watched his favorite show, the animated opening to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And the next day, I cuddled him that entire day too, until our appointment at the very last second that the vet was open, and he purred the whole time. My mother went with me to the vet, and at one point she and I were in separate places, and one of the vet techs came over and told her that they were so sorry to see Houdini there that day. Over the 2.5 years of shots, they'd all gotten to know and love Houdini and be frankly amazed by him. Every month, they were shocked he was alive. They started taking to calling him a miracle cat. And he really was a miracle. I looked up the average lifespan of a Manx, and it said 10 to 14 years. With exceptional diet and vet care, they can live 15 to 18 years. And my cat, he was just 3 months shy of 20 years old. The whole time we were at the vet that day, I so badly wanted to scoop him up and just leave, and I wanted to run away. I didn't, but I had a dream that I did. A week or two after I walked out of the vet's office without him. I dreamed that I'd pulled his old pink kennel from when he was a kitten out from underneath me, and I put him in it before speeding back to my apartment. And night fell as we drove. Instead of the one I currently live in, I returned to a different apartment that Alex and I had looked at but decided not to get. And at the door were a bunch of my friends with groceries. They were all faces I knew and loved, and I opened the door. They went right in and they started setting up shop, cooking and cleaning and arranging, and it was just full of love. But then I remembered that I didn't bring Houdini home. So I knelt down to see what was in the cage. I opened it and it was empty. And it hurt, but it was a good kind of hurt. It was a good dream. So when I woke up, I decided it was time to tell people. I wanted to make a Facebook post so that the people who met and had loved Houdini would know. So this is what I wrote. Once upon a time, there was a kitten, and there was Death. Death said to the kitten, "It's time to go." The kitten said, "I'm not ready to say goodbye yet." Death said, "You will never be ready. I can take you to a place of comfort, of love, of endless red dots to chase and cars to watch." The kitten wavered, for he was tired, but still he said, "Give me 3 months, then I will go with you." And Death agreed. But when Death returned, the kitten said, 3 months just isn't enough." Death frowned at him. "You said you would come with me." "And I will," said the kitten. "But 3 months wasn't enough time. I have things to do, you see, and people who love me." Death crossed his arms. "You will always have things to do and people to love. Then give me 1 more month to do what I need to do and love who needs love." 1 more month, Death agreed, but only 1 more. However, the kitten wheedled and talked his way out of it month after month, even when it was hard or when he had to say goodbye to his best friend. Finally, after 2.5 years, Death put down his foot. "Aren't you tired?" The kitten looked at him. "I'm so tired. I want to lay down." "Don't you want to see your puppy? He's waiting for you, you understand," Death pushed. "I do want to see him. I've missed him so much," agreed the kitten. "Then come with me," Death said. Still, the kitten hesitated. "Give me 1 last week." "Why should I?" Death asked. "I have granted your wishes more times than anyone else." The kitten smiled. "Because I want to say goodbye to my little girl. 19 years ago, she pulled me out of my cage and held me close. So I want to do the same for her." "Isn't that what you've been doing with all your extra time?" Death asked. "What else would I be doing?" the kitten asked. Death stared at the kitten. 1 last week. Don't waste it." And he didn't. I will always love my little Houdini. That's what I posted. A little story just for him. And it's funny because as we reach the end of this crazy long video and the end of my cat's life, the end of all of this, I can tell you that though the time is gone, he's not really gone. Houdini was my baby when I was a baby. He was my kitten when he was a grown cat. And now that he's not here, he's still with me. I carry around his laser light wherever I go, and I keep his bed by my side when I sleep, and I take time to listen to his purr when I hurt. But now, I know that he and Spike are back together, and I'm sure of that. Their paw prints sit together on my shelf. And one day, I won't get to just see Houdini. I'll get to see all of them. And isn't that a beautiful thing?